Welcome back to another episode of Uncut and Uncensored with Caroline Stanbury. And today's guest is the definition of a woman who backed herself before anyone else did. She went from starting a running club in a homeless shelter to building one of the biggest fitness empires in America. She's tough, direct, wildly disciplined, and honestly the kind of women people either deeply admire or find slightly intimidating, which usually means she's doing something right. I can attest to that. She's built and changed lives, made over $100 million, and still somehow managed to stay grounded and care deeply about people who society overlooks. Welcome, Anne Mahlum.
Well, whoever wrote that, they're hired.
Oh, well, thank you. That would be me. What am I
Wonderful.
doing for you?
Thank you for the introduction. Nice to be here.
Well, we've been trying to do this for a while. And I just want to say congratulations because I know you're in the thick of having a baby. We're just 5 months old. So I know how hard it is and running an empire and. You know,
Yes, it's been awesome though. No regrets so far.
so take me back. I'm fascinated. I've been trying to get a hold of you for a while and I know how busy you are. So thank you for doing this. But take me back to how on earth did you have this drive back in the early days and build something like this with no background or in it or, connections to do this?
Yeah, I think every entrepreneur there's some deep unsettling emotional scar, not feeling good enough, that really drives people to this high level of achievement that we think is going to equate to love. And usually it's just adoration and praise, which isn't a substitute for love, but you can get by on that for a long time. And my upbringing, I'm very close to both of my parents today, but I've had tumultuous relationship with them throughout the years, the ups and the downs. And my dad is an addict, and you ask my dad what he's addicted to, and he will look you straight in the eye and say everything. And he has had his fair share of battles with drugs and alcohol. Fortunately, got sober when I was really little, but gambling became a problem for him when I was a teenager, and that ripped my parents' marriage apart and destroyed my perfect image of who I thought my father was and what I thought my family life was going to look like. So from early teenage years, I started to tell myself that I was going to be somebody, and I was going to be so extraordinary that, nobody could ever hurt me or would ever want to leave me. So it came from this place of, watching my parents' marriage crumble and never wanting to be in that position. And frankly, wanting to have enough money that money would never be an issue for me or anybody that I loved ever again, because we didn't have a lot to begin with. And then my dad's gambling problem, I equated not having money with divorce, not having money with not being able to do the things that we wanted, with stress, with resentment. It just seemed to cause a lot of problems. So I was pretty determined from a very young age. The members that I helped were
Oh,
homeless. So
that's
I
right.
was running, yeah, I was 26 years old, running by a homeless shelter, day after day, and frankly, never took any interest in the people that I saw, because I had the same stereotypes that everybody else did, which is these individuals
They're
are
lazy.
dangerous and
Yeah.
you have nothing in common with them, and keep your distance. And then for whatever reason, a couple years, literally it took me 2 years, a group of guys outside that homeless shelter started to wave at me and to talk to me, and I started to engage and realize that I had been a runner for 10 years at this point, which was helping me heal myself, emotionally, mentally, and just the way it made me feel physically. And I had this idea that running could also help them, and that they didn't have to just be the homeless guys on the corner, that they could rebuild their sense of self, their self-esteem, understand that they're capable of more. And I think that really starts with hard work. When you can show yourself that you can do difficult things, especially running, right? Running at 6 in the morning is, you first got to get out of bed and when you don't want to, and fight all of the excuses that we all lean into sometimes, and then going out and moving your body first thing in the morning. it quickly, after the running club started, it became really evident that these guys were starting to see themselves differently, not as somebody who was homeless, but somebody who was a runner, an athlete, a teammate, somebody who could set goals, somebody who could make positive choices. And so I did not have a background in homelessness, but I did have a background in addiction through my dad's experience and my experience. And just seem to have this awareness that if people don't want to change, change won't happen. So we were giving an environment and an opportunity to people to make better choices. And the thesis before this whole thing really took off was that if people can see that they're capable of more and understand they're capable of more, that's how you're actually going to fix the homeless problem. It's not just jobs and homes. People have to learn to want more for themselves and see that it's really possible for them. So we worked on the whole emotional well-being before we even focused on employment and housing.
I mean, do you feel like were you met resistance from your family who thought the whole idea was just ridiculous and, and that you weren't going to do well from it? Like, how did they support you through something like this when you've got a father who is so heavily involved into addiction? How do you take yourself out of that environment and then create such a positive one from, this adversity, really?
Yeah, so I think there are a few things that were standing in my way or other people's way of seeing this as a real possibility.
Hmm.
One, this was 2007.
Yeah.
So entrepreneurship, really wasn't a big thing back then, particularly not so much for women. And let alone social entrepreneurship. I wasn't starting a business, I was starting a nonprofit where I was going to get people to donate to me, give me money out of the goodness of their heart to build this thing. So my mom was just like, "What? Like, what do you mean you're going to do this for work?" And I also had just had an amazing job offer that I accepted at Comcast, which was the biggest company in Philly at the time. Um, and it was a six-figure, job opportunity and stock options, which I didn't even know what those were back then. And a really great opportunity for myself and my career. And I had said yes, and then I asked for 6 weeks so I could see if this idea that I had could get some legs, pun intended, and I could get enough people involved that it would work when I wasn't going to be able to be around due to the job I was taking. And so when I started to think like, oh my God, like this is what I'm supposed to do with my life, one, 10 years of telling yourself that you're supposed to be somebody, this was my opportunity. I never stopped saying that to myself. Even though I felt like I hadn't become somebody in those 10 years, I felt like this is everything I was asking for. Two, it was making my life make sense. All those years of my dad's addictions, nothing good came from that, Caroline, like nothing. My relationship with him, my parents' divorce, my dad filing for bankruptcy, like there was nothing to show from it. So I sort of felt all of that pain could be put into
Wait,
helping
wait, can you
people.
stop 1 second? I'm so sorry. Something's just playing over me. Sergio, it's playing an old podcast over her. So sorry.
It's okay.
Quickly.
Oh. Super. You just have it now?
Yes.
Okay.
Please stay there just in case.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No
Um,
worries.
where cut that bit. Where did you get to? We just got to.
Uh,
You had the job offer,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. Did
and
you get all that? You need me to go back?
yeah, I got that. You got the job offer. No one believed you were going to be able to make
Yeah.
legs of this. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So nothing good came from my dad's addictions, and to think that I could be fueled by that to help all these people was really motivating for me. And my dad, ironically enough, was concerned for my safety, and none of my mentors, thought this was wise or rational because I didn't have any money and I never had started a nonprofit before. So everybody thought I was a little batshit crazy for thinking that, this could be my career and that I could actually help these guys become not homeless.
I mean, the crazy thing is, like, I'm listening to you. I feel like you're like a super manifester. Like, do you believe in all that? Like, I feel
Yeah.
like you've told your because they always say if you don't speak it and you become it. And
Well, listen, if you're not speaking it, you don't become aware of it. So I believe that there are these windows that come in everybody's life, but if you're not prepared, you don't see them. They pass you by. And so I'll give you an example, Caroline, of, when I was 16 and said, you're going to be somebody someday. Well, guess what that 16-year-old did? She started taking action like she was going to be somebody. I moved away to college. I did an internship in DC, and then I moved to DC for grad school, and then I moved to Philly on my own. You have to take risk if you're going to be different. You can't do things the way everybody else did. So when that moment came that, I felt, okay, this is my time, it actually didn't feel so scary because I'd already taken all of these big action steps from a kid from North Dakota to get to where I was, and I had figured it out. And so, and solid core, which comes after back on my feet, was the exact same thing. Once you start saying, I'm ready for this, you start to look around and pay attention, and you want it to come true. So I always tell folks, like, the manifestation, I like to call it manifestation because of my name. But if you're not doing that, it's never going to happen. And if you're only saying, like, oh, I really want to meet somebody, but you're staying home every night, like, that's not going to work either. You have to partner the manifestation with the action to back up those things that you say that you want. And it doesn't work with just doing one of them.
oh, and it's never the easy route. I agree. I've always taken the path unknown, and that's what led me to everything good in my life. I was one of the first people that I knew that moved to the Middle East. Everyone was so, didn't know what it was 12 years ago, really.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
and here I am and I love it. So I'm a big believer in acting and changing your life and your mindset. But as you said, back then it really was going against the grain. And entrepreneurship, it was you. As soon as you got out of school, everyone wanted you to go in to be a lawyer or, whatever it was, one job, one direction. And
Mhm.
now I think, and you probably will agree with me, you need to have many sources of income and really, put yourself out there and diversify and learn different things.
Well, I think if people really, it's like, do you want to be working for 50 years to just get by, to save enough money that you can live, 15, 20 years on a budget, clipping coupons? Like, the way that this life was designed, economically speaking, doesn't sound like a lot of fun. And I also had, that awareness as a kid too, of like, everybody just seems to be stressed out, doing chores, running errands, and having no fun, and always stressed about money. There has to be a different way, to do this. So I think for people who are, saying they want something different, but you're following the same playbook as people who don't have what you want, you're going to have to take risk at some point in your life to have a different path than the rest of the people around you. It's unequivocal.
But it is hard when your entire environment is shaped that way and that's all you know. If you're looking around and you don't have a role model or people to aspire to that live near you, then it's quite hard to take those steps on your own and not feel delulu.
Yes, I agree. And I'm not saying it was ever going to be easy or scary or uncertain. And I think if you talk to anybody who has done that, you've got to have a strategy and a practice for the fear and the doubts that try to penetrate, all of us.
How
So
did you how did you cut out all the noise? That's my point
well,
from going from
because
that
you
to
realize,
building this.
yeah, you realize at some point fear and growth feel the exact same way. Like, you get nervous, your palms start to sweat, like your heart beats a little bit faster. That happens when we're excited, and it happens, when we're scared. And everybody has to figure out how to differentiate, am I really in a place where I should am in danger or panic? And what's the true worst case scenario here? And when Back on My Feet was starting, most people tried to convince me of, these guys are going to quit, you're going to be left with no job, you're going to turn down this opportunity, you're going to have no money, you're going to be evicted from your apartment, and then you're going to end up in the homeless shelter. And I'm just like, that's just not a likely scenario. If this doesn't work out, the worst case scenario is I go get another job somewhere. Like I'm confident I'd be able to get another job. So it's not as diabolical as we all, can allow ourselves to feel. But the probable scenario is like there's a real shot this does work. If I make the right decisions and I have so much conviction about the idea and my background, I'm like, I am actually the perfect person to do this. Nobody else is better positioned. I didn't have money, but I didn't really have debt. Wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I had nothing but time and energy and passion and grit and discipline to pour into this. So it really was the most perfect, opportunity. But that's the thing, that the fear and the growth, you need to think when you feel all of those sweaty palms, heart rate going, you either ask for that and it's going to be exciting and you're going to show up and rise to the occasion, or you're going to go and run underneath your covers. And I think, Caroline, this might sound, silly to some, but if you start taking the small risks, like cutting your hair shorter or going to dinner by yourself, or if you've been living in the same city your entire life, like go try a different city and see how it goes. Go try to make new friends. You need to take these little risks in every area of your life, because you don't go from having the same haircut, living in the same city, doing whatever, and then starting a big business. You just don't, you're not prepared to do that. You're not at that point where that's going to feel possible. It's like trying to go run a marathon, but never ever have running at first, had a first day. Like it's probably not going to work out for you.
And when did you know that, you were going to be able to do this? Like, I mean, do you feel like the journey gave you the happiness or the end result did? Like, when did you know that this was going to be huge?
Well, I think for both Back on My Feet and Solid Core, it was the all in mentality. And I really have this, saying that, if failure is an option for you, it will be the result. I think you have to go all in. I believe that way with personal relationships too. It's why I got married. It's really easy to find the exit when you've got one foot in and one foot out when things get hard, because you're not committed. And both with Back on My Feet and Solid Core, I went all in such a big way that I didn't have a plan B. I didn't have an option. I know we haven't gotten to Solid Core yet, and we will, but my first 15 months of Solid Core, I got sued twice, one from an ex-boyfriend, and I got evicted from my first
Explain
studio.
the two to people that may not
Well,
know your
sure,
story.
sure. So, Back on My Feet's the nonprofit
Yeah.
that, helps
Yes.
people living in shelters through running. And then, when I decided it was time to move on from that, same thing. Everything was open. I had, what's my next thing? I have to be able to figure out where I'm going to go next. I don't want to go to work for somebody else. I want to be an entrepreneur. And I took a Pilates class in Los Angeles, and I, had ran 11 marathons by then. I was triathlons, you name it. I considered myself extremely fit and athletic. And I thought this would be a fun class to take. And it was so humbling. I didn't know you could work out like that. All of the areas that as a woman I was trying to target and get toned and whatever, I was so sore in all those spots the next day. I was just amazed at how challenging it was. I started taking Pilates in New York, and then I started to run the math on the business model. And I'm like, this is an incredible business. Like it is a cash cow for how much I'm paying, the number of machines in there. But there's no vibe. Like nobody's mastered the vibe. And it was really, I wasn't say it was the top of Soul Cycle, but Soul Cycle was in its prime. And I'm like, I'm going to do this for the Pilates business, what Soul Cycle did for cycling. So I left Back on My Feet, transitioned into a different CEO, and I took all of my money at $175,000 over those 6 years saved up. And I put every dime into opening my first Solid Core studio. And those doubts came back a month before I was opening. One of my Back on My Feet board members, who was a big executive at Accenture, offered me $75,000 for 30% of Solid Core. Now, I didn't have a studio open. I had an idea, I was going to do it. So that was a lot of money to me back then. And there were these moments where I'm like, that would be really smart. Why don't I save 75K of my own money just in case this doesn't work out? And as soon as I said those words, it's this doubt that you allow to live in you rent free, that when things get hard, you're going to lean even more into it. And I really believe if I would have taken that investment, that I probably would have figured out a way to close down Solid Core, in those first couple years, or I wouldn't have grown it as big, because I would have told myself, oh, I saved enough money. Like, I made the right decision over here. Um,
It's true. No plan B.
yeah, yeah. So I went all in. I turned down the investment, and fortunately, the first studio was such a hit, and then it was off to the races. I mean, I had 5 or 6 of these open in the first year. I had 25 open in the first 4 years, and then I took funding and continued to grow it to 100 locations across the U.S.
It's amazing. I mean, did when you did that, how did it make you feel as a woman, like achieving that? Because obviously the other one was your purpose and your passion.
Yeah,
And then this became the thing that really, really sort of built you as a brand. I
yeah.
suppose, like, how did you feel when you achieved such an amazing number? Like, I mean, most people will never understand what that's like. I mean, what did your family say? Your father? I mean,
Yeah. It's very cool. And I think the cool part is I always tell founders that I, negotiate, or that I'm consulting with or advising, or anytime I'm speaking, that I want you to think about your last day at your company. And most people haven't. They don't envision what that's going to be like. And I'm like, you're going to have a last day whether you like it or not. And so you might as well plan. I wanted to have a celebration. I wanted a happy ending. I wanted to set the terms. I wanted to decide when. And so I told myself from a pretty early on that I was going to open 100 of these things, and then I was going to sell it. And for as long as I can remember, my employees at the time will tell you the same thing. Anne was always very honest that she was going to, that her goal was to build and sell the company someday. So no one was ever shocked by me taking on private equity money. And then at some point, and 3 years ago, pretty much, sold all my shares in the business. And it felt it felt earned. I felt proud because I did what I said I was going to do. Um, and I feel like after doing it a second time, that I finally understood that the achievement piece doesn't equal love. That I'm like, okay, I've proven to anyone who's ever doubted me, including, myself at times, that I'm smart enough, driven enough, resilient enough to do this if I choose to do it again, but it no longer has to define me. I also get to sleep really well at night because I made my wealth on helping people, particularly women, get stronger. And that feels really good that it has had such a positive association and influence on people's lives. I still love when I see, people walking around with Solid Core shirts on, or the messages that I'll get. I feel really proud. And I frankly don't think my parents or family at that point was surprised at all. It's like, they had gotten to see that girl execute for so many years, and know that whatever Anne decides to do, she's going to win. If she wants to win, there's just no stopping her when she gets her mindset on something. So yeah, I know that they're super proud. And hopefully, it's fun that I get to share many experiences with them that we couldn't afford before.
yeah, how did it sort of happen with your family? Like when you got the money, you sold the business, did you
Yeah.
feel like, how did it change your relationship with them? Did you feel like, and your friends, people
Yeah.
around you, does it change everything, or did they know?
It's a valid question. And I've heard the horror stories that, people go through. But I've always been somebody who's talked about money, even when I didn't have it, because I knew I was going to get it. I would, and I did take money off the table along the way during the raises I did for Solid Core's growth. So they got some indication with it, and I always told them, listen, I'm going to give you guys X amount of money when this happens. I had always already started paying for plane tickets, for family gatherings, for things like that. But I can tell you that my family has never once asked me for money, not once. And my sister, makes 30 grand a year being a teacher's aide. My brother sells cars. He does pretty well for himself. That's a recent career change for him. Um, they accept the gifts from me, but they know that it's not a guarantee, or they know that they never like, well, yeah, well, I don't have to work because Anne's gonna, pay for this. They have amazing work ethic. They both want to work, and I feel good that I can help them um, have experiences and take the pressure off of their kids' college educations and things like that, that they don't have to worry about. But I really can look you in the eye and tell you that money hasn't changed my relationship with my family at all.
Do you feel that it's made you harder or softer as a person? And also, I've seen a lot of people that sort of once they've made the money, they kind of feel sad that they're not in the hustle anymore.
Yeah, I don't feel that way. I can understand why people do, and that's what goes back to what I was saying before: is having a plan and an end game, and having an identity outside of your business. I had pretty much 18 years of being a hard driven, entrepreneur, building, scaling, high growth endeavors. And I loved every second of it. And, maybe you'll appreciate this, Caroline, but I try to tell women, like, I do think you can have it all. You just need to do it in the right order that works for you. I think trying to have a killer career and be married and have money and have kids all in the same decade is a really, really challenging thing to do. There are definitely, probably a handful of women out there who can say that they have done that. I think that sounds super stressful, but for my life, I have always envisioned having these multiple different chapters to feel like I get to live 10 lives in one. And if you stay in the game long enough, and I'll tell you, I even made the mistake, right? After Solid Core, I ended up starting another fitness business, and I closed it down 9 months later because I'm like, what am I doing? I'm going to live the same 10 years that I already lived. For what? I don't really need any more money. And if I want to make more money, I can figure out a more creative way to do this where I'm going to be learning and growing. This just doesn't make sense. So I think that happiness and joy comes from, you moved to the Middle East for a certain reason because you wanted an experience, you wanted something different. And a lot of people, in my opinion, end up staying in the same industry or job because they don't know what else to do. And they're afraid to quote unquote start over. And I like starting over. I like feeling like I get to explore and figure out a brand new way to do something. And for me, it's not another business right now. It's learning to be a mom. I play competitive volleyball, beach volleyball, pretty much every single day.
Wow.
And that's not everybody's cup of tea, but I've been an athlete since I can remember, and having a sport to pour into where I'm in training, I take lessons, I'm in a tournament this weekend. It's really fulfilling to me. I just finished my book, which will hopefully, get published later this year. So I'm dabbling in other areas that have nothing to do with starting and building another business. I don't have an interest in that right now.
I mean, I actually think that, the wealth brings you the freedom to sleep peacefully and freedom to be able to choose what you want to do. And more than that, I just think the greatest gift you can have is peace because, a lot of people are unable to find that within themselves. And, being able to pour yourself into a sport and things that you love and raising your children on your own terms is the ultimate luxury as a woman.
I could not agree more. And I just had my first baby at 45, and I always tell women, like, freeze your eggs, take the pressure off, because something has to give somewhere. I mean, and it usually ends up being the woman's career. Out of all of the statistics and data that you read, when women start to have babies, when they're on the rise up in their profession, something has to give somewhere. And I didn't want to be one of those people that felt like I'm failing in one of these areas. And if you want to have $100 million, you're going to miss a lot of kids' birthday parties. You're going to miss a lot of, recitals and sporting events. if that's really your goal to get to. And, I don't regret a second of building Solid Core. I loved it, but I can also tell you it's all I did. Every person I spent time with, every social event I did was like, let's go take a class, let's go to Solid Core. It was my whole entire stratosphere. Whoever I was spending time with was in some way, shape, or form connected to that company.
And so now, what is your, next chapter for you? Just to be a mother and to enjoy this time at home, and because you've spent so much time doing this. And what advice would you give women at this stage? Because a lot of women feel, lost when they, have changed their identity. And it seems to me that this is only empowering you. You're not feeling so
Mhm.
lost.
Well, again, for me, it's a couple of things. I have a night nurse that still comes to this house every single night, so I sleep
Game changer.
8, 9 hours a night, and that is a privileged position. I understand that, and I know that, and it's why I tell people try not to have kids when you don't have money. I think because the majority of the work, just biologically speaking, falls on the woman, right? When you're carrying the baby, giving birth, postpartum, for those who breastfeed, I still breastfeed. It's just a biological thing. And so that was a negotiable for me. And the women who are getting up multiple times a night and waking up and taking care of other kids and have a job, I mean, it's like I want to start a GoFundMe page. Like every single mother I know that I meet that is in my life, I give them money because how they are doing this is just beyond me. So it hasn't changed my identity, Caroline, because I still work. I'm still speaking, 2 to 3 times a month. I get to pick and choose the events that I speak at. I get to pick and choose the podcasts that I want to do. I get to spend the time on my book on a time frame that works for me at hours that work for me. And I get to play beach volleyball pretty much every day from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Plus, making time to go to the gym and be social. So my whole world does not revolve around my son, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, I am more than just my son's mother, and if I don't get to fill myself up in those other areas, I'm not going to be a very great mom for him. I think that resentment would start to fill in. And two, it's really important for Elliot, which is my son's name, to for him to see his mom have other things going on besides just catering to his every need. And now he's too young to know that because he's a baby. But as he gets older, he will see that there are other priorities. I also want to show him, how the relationship it's like for to be with a woman. If I was just everything about my life was about him, then I think that causes trouble for the relationship he ends up with, to
Hmm.
think that the woman comes second to, his goals and careers. And I've never been able or willing to want to make that sacrifice for any man that I have been with. I was never willing to say, you do your career and I don't need one. So I'm trying to be intentional about all of that stuff while still, loving him like crazy and finding time to be me. And I won't hopefully be in a position where I have to choose, one or the other.
Do you think people underestimate the power of a routine?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, listen, his routine, sleeping, eating, his schedule, absolutely. And for Brett and I, like I said, I play volleyball every morning at 7. So that means I get up every morning at 5:30. The night nurse goes home. I feed Elliot. I get from 5:30 to 7 with him. Whether Brett gets up at that point, and takes him for a little while or goes right to the gym. We have a nanny who comes. We work on the schedule the night before, but everything is sort of planned out yesterday for the next day, if not, several days in advance based off of what the week looks like. So of course you need a routine and a schedule if you're going to make any real progress on what you say your priorities are. You can't just be like, if they happen, they happen.
And you've always lived that way before even Elliot. Like you've always had a routine in your day.
Always. And, the example, that I'll give around college, as that girl went into college saying, I'm going to be somebody someday. Okay, well, what do I have to do differently than everybody else? And it was most people graduate in 4 years. I'm going to do it in 3. Because if I'm graduating 4, I'm just like everybody else. So I figured out a way to perfect my schedule. I took 21 credits every single semester in college. I was the vice president of the Public Relations Association.
But
I was
wait,
on student government.
that's nuts at that age. How do you do that when, especially when you're in college and you're like meant to be doing whatever it's called, beer bongs at parties? Like, how do you have the foresight to like, do you date? Do you do those things, or you just shut off your world?
I had a boyfriend in college, but he was also very aware that like, and it's, I wish I would have kept some of these scrapbooks because every 10-minute increment in my day was planned out to walking to class, to driving, to campus, to every little thing. Like it was optimized to down to the 10-minute increment because that was the only way I was going to get anything done. And the homework never ever got procrastinated because if it did, I was going to drown. I had to get any homework done in the same day, so that window was always carved out. And those things, even being, I was a server, I had a job in college also that I worked every Friday and Saturday night. And all of these things helped me optimize my time. So when you're waiting tables, it was like, okay, if I'm going to go back in the kitchen, I got 6 tables. What does everybody need? So I don't have to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When I left the house when I was in Washington, D.C., it was an hour and 10 minutes to campus. And I had classes starting in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, plus a job, plus working out. So I had to leave, with my tennis shoes for the gym, with my uniform for work, like you name it. I had to make sure I had everything, and it just needed to be structured and planned out perfectly. And so that's what I was saying earlier. All of that prep work, that when it came time to
Put it into
start
action.
with risk and even run the company, right? I had optimized time and energy outputs in order to have the biggest ROI in my personal life for a decade. So it just wasn't that difficult of a transition to do it for business.
Do you look at women now and you can immediately tell what they're doing wrong? Because I can see a woman that sort of has a good idea, they want to do something, but it's like they're frozen. They're
Yeah,
just
of course.
stuck by their situation and they can't see further. And it's very frustrating because you know that this one change could change their life.
Yeah. Listen, and I think that you have to figure out where that's coming from, why that person is stuck. And I think it comes down to trying to get that person to think about a time in their life when they took action because they wanted something bad enough. If you go and ask everybody, Caroline, hey, would you like $100 million? Everybody's probably going to say yes. I
Right.
don't, you know what I mean? Like whether you want to use it for yourself or give it away or donate it, most people aren't going to turn that down. But the difference is the bad enough piece of what you're willing to do
To get it.
to make that happen because it took, I mean, and I think I did it quickly. Like it took me a decade from solid core, and COVID was in the middle, of that. I always try to tell people like I would have done that in 7 years, but it takes a committed, dedicated decade to even build $20 million, and everything has to go right. And you need to take so many punches and you need to just not give up. You need to pivot when you need to know, when to pivot. There's so many things that need to go right that you're going to have the resilience muscle to just not give up when the going gets tough. So that's the first part, is trying to remind people, like, think about a time, whether it was a boy that you liked, that you were willing to do whatever to see him on that Friday night. That I do think that lives in everybody. You just kind of have to figure out and be honest of like, well, maybe you don't want it bad enough. Maybe you want the outcome more than you want the work. And, you got to be honest about those things, because it can create a lot of analysis paralysis. And then 5 years go by and you're in the exact same position.
I absolutely think that's the best advice because, so many women talk a big game And then when it comes to the reality, they have so many reasons in their head that they cannot move forward. And it comes from, and that's why it's so interesting to hear from you as well, because it always kind of the excuse of I don't have enough money to start a business and I don't have, and I think it's such a bullshit excuse today because there is so many options available to yourself if you take, and it's an amazing time to be an entrepreneur as a woman.
Yeah.
To be able to pivot. And a lot of people don't have that mindset. And, yours came from a very early age, but it's talking to women today, what piece of advice, if someone is listening to today's podcast, and obviously you don't have to be thinking $100 million, people, but I know there are women out there who have been through some sort of trauma, who want to start a new life, want to start something fresh. What would you suggest to these women?
Well, there's I think there's a lot of pieces of advice here, but you want to take it as small as possible. And first ask why you haven't done it today. Try to figure out where that fear is coming from and if it's real. So if someone wants to be an influencer, but their fear of embarrassment is greater than their fear of success, you're never going to do it. If you can't deal with people saying you look stupid or, what do you think you're talking about? If you can't deal with the comments, like you're just not going to make it. You need to figure out a way to have your desire of success be greater than your desire of failure or embarrassment or fear. And the only way to do that is by taking action. You can't think in hypotheticals. You can't be like, okay, I'm ready to do it. The only way to do it, it's like, how are you going to learn how to swim? The only way to do it is to get in the water. It's an unequivocal, like you can't go run 10 miles and think all of a sudden you're okay, I know how to swim now. So that's the first thing. And two, from the recipe of success, what I think is underrated or doesn't get enough attention is thinking through what your skill sets actually are. I know how to build community. I know how to get people on board with an idea that I'm excited about, and I understand structure and process. So those things really help me build an in-person fitness brand, both with Back on My Feet and Solid Core. They are both around fitness. And that's the magic of what I can do. Now, if you said, Anne, you need to be, a furniture designer, I'd be like, I am going to fail at that. I know nothing about that. Like, I'm not interested in it either. So like, I'm not going to be successful there. The trick is finding out what you are better at than 90% of the people out there, and then finding a business that needs those talents and skill sets and putting your energy in that business to succeed. Like scaling Solid Core did not feel hard to me because I had scaled Back on My Feet to 14 cities, in pretty much 4 years as a nonprofit, getting people to give me money. Here, this was a for-profit business. People were going to be paying for a service. It frankly felt easier to do Solid Core than Back on My Feet. But even though the one's a for-profit, nonprofit, they were very similar. It was, what's the smallest ecosystem that I need to create that I then can replicate and build in the layers of oversight and management as it gets bigger. So how does every single studio be self-sufficient? What do I need for that studio to run without me? Okay, great. What does the next studio need? And that's how you continue to build. But you know what? I couldn't have gotten to 100 without that first one. If I didn't get that first one right and pour all the energy into number one, and I think, Caroline, people do that too. They start from step A and they go all the way to step Z. And they're like, well, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, whatever you think step Z is not even going to be it. Just focus on step A, figure out, what that needs to look like, and then you'll figure out what step 2 is. But too many people are just afraid to even, take the step. And that's the work I think that folks need to really be honest with themselves about.
I really love listening to you because it's so true. When I get so many people, and I'm a serial entrepreneur too. And, I always say a business is like a roller coaster. It's not a straight line. People seem to think if I start here, I'm going to end up here. That is never the case. Never. And,
Yeah.
you need to understand that, and you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And, I think the new generations will be. Unfortunately, we're of the older generation where,
Mhm.
it's what society thinks and what other people think. And we've been brought up that way to fear, what other people think. I don't think the teenagers today will have so much, you know, judgment on them as we did. But, and that's the fear of the women that I meet every single day. And you're absolutely right. It is baby steps, ladies, baby steps, and you can create something incredible. There is nothing that stands between you and Anne. And that's, I think, what is
Totally.
is so powerful to understand that she didn't come with it. She didn't get a guidebook when she was born. You didn't have an education in the business that you were in at that
Mhm.
time. You didn't know. I mean, I don't even know like how you raise the money from a fund, because the first time I ever did that it's terrifying.
Yeah.
I'd never been in and asked people for money like that and get people to believe in you. And I think you have to go for it today, because if you don't, someone else will.
Yeah, and that's where regret gets built. 70, this stat stays with me, every single day, or when I speak, it's that 76% of people have significant, right? Significant regret at the end of their life. Never about the things that they tried or did or they said. It's always about the I wish I would have. I wish I would have tried. I can't believe I didn't do XYZ. And, us being not in our 20s anymore, we can both attest time goes fast. And the best time to start is yesterday, and the best time to start today, and the third best time to start is, tomorrow. And the longer you let it go, and I just think the lessons too, like I cannot guarantee you everything is going to go as planned, but you're going to continue to be like, oh, I figured that out. Oh, I learned that lesson. And I think sometimes it's really easy to look at people who've made it and just think, oh, their circumstances were so different.
Hmm.
They were had this and that. And I'm like, you can discredit all of those people all you want. It's never going to change your own situation. And so at some point, we all have to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to do something differently if I want a different life than what I have today. And there's no shortcut. There's no way around it. It's not going to feel easy. It's going to feel uncomfortable and scary. But I think when people actually accept that anybody who's ever done it did the work to get to that point and fight through the doubts and the fears the same way that the 23-year-old girl listening has to do, it feels like, okay, that's just the path. It's just if you're willing to do the work or not.
And it's the next chapter. It's everybody has to. You want to have chapters, ladies. I mean, Anne, you're having a baby at 45. I'm 50 years old, and building a hotel in Bali right now. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm doing it. You know what I mean?
Very
And
cool.
it's the journey.
Yeah.
It's
And
the,
that's what makes it fun. Like if we knew the answer every single day, imagine playing a game that you always knew the answer to. How boring would that be?
How boring would that be? I don't know where I'm going to end up. I'm sure you don't know where you're going to end up. And that's the power of, success and being able to choose and to try new things. So thank you, Anne, for taking the time today. I know that you have a really, really hectic schedule. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. You're amazing and a
Thank
great
you.
inspiration to many women. Tell everybody how they can find you, your book, or everything.
Yeah, I try to stay on Instagram only. There's too many platforms, so I'm pretty active on Instagram, and I try to share business and entrepreneurial advice and also wealth building advice, particularly for women. So it's just my name, Anne Mahlum. And other than that, you can find me on the volleyball court.
Oh my God, we'll leave that to you. Thank you again. And thank you for listening to another episode of Uncut and Uncensored.